Hello, hello, Francesco. First one here. How are you doing? Just enjoying the slideshow of all the beautiful finished pieces from people from our community. Oh, so beautiful. It's amazing what people create, you know? Always so proud of the people of our community, what they can pull out of their sleeve. Gonna switch it up in just a little bit. Hello, good time. Hope you're having a good time, Hello, Alexander. Hello, Bodhi. Welcome, welcome. Francisco saying everything is well. How are you doing? Good. We just had a little chat in our community Discord talking about a bunch of Ubisoft related things. All the news going around. Not the recent news, just like the old news of them like having a strike, I think last week in like all the Paris offices, I think, and then also Ubisoft Milan. So we're kind of just chatting away about that. A little bit of fun. And then also talking about Dead Island 2. Because it's on Game Pass now. And I have been playing it. Because it was kind of one of those games where I didn't... It sounds so weird as a game developer, especially. Like, I didn't want to go full price on the game. Because I know that it wasn't going to be my game to play, right? I don't generally enjoy, like, the tone that the game was setting. And I can definitely confirm that, like, the tone of the game is nothing really for me. But I'm enjoying the environments, though. Like, the environments look really beautiful. Ouch news. I'm actually not sure what happened with the strikes that Ubisoft was doing. Like, because I think the strikes were about negotiating a higher salary, or also with the return from home policy, or like return to work policy, or whatever changes, right? Where I think they're doubling down and having everyone go back in the office right now, which a lot of companies are doing out there. And I think they were just like, nope, not doing that. And they went on like I think a 2 or 3 day strike. I'm actually not sure. Let's actually have a quick peek. I'm curious now. While we wait for people to come in. Doo-doo. In Milan, salaries are insufficient. I was offered less than 1,500 euros a month for living in Milan and doing QA stuff for a big company too. It's crazy. Well, yeah, I wish I could say something different when I started out, but I was paying so in the beginning I was on a salary of 19,000 a year as an artist, right? So as like a graduate artist, I was on 19,000 a year, and I was living in a shared house where I just had like a small room with just like a single bed, and that was it, and like maybe like a little desk that I could barely like fit in. And I was paying like I found my contract recently, I think 300 or 400 quid for that. Which is yeah. I think that was also plus expenses. So it is crazy. Like the stuff that we have to get into sometimes. I will say that on average, what I've been seeing is that junior wages are going up. Um, and I'm pretty happy seeing like the numbers that juniors are getting now in a lot of companies that I've worked at or kind of know the salaries from. So there is a positive trend happening out there. But also at the same time, I think there's also like a negative trend happening because there's so much desperation in the market right now that there's also going to be people that are going to make use of that too, right? So an increase of scams, an increase of like low paying jobs and all that kind of stuff too. It's it always goes back and forth a little bit. At least some positive news. I think there's a lot of positive news, but like the thing with positive news is that it doesn't travel as far and wide as negative news does, right? There's a lot of people from our community, for example, that have gotten jobs in like recent months, right? Whenever other people are saying that it's like impossible to find a job out there now. It's not. There's opportunities out there. There's just less of them, right? Yeah, there is a lot of positive stuff out there too. You kind of just have to look for it more. Do you think that all the job requests for senior artists in Leeds is a good sign of expansion? Oh, the current job openings out there now for seniors in Leeds? That could not necessarily mean expansion. That could mean that the previous people in senior and lead positions just left for whatever reason, and now they're looking for replacements, right? So it's not necessarily a sign of expansion. What has been happening in the last couple of years is that there's a lot of frustration with seniors and leads and all those people too, where they have just like left and started doing their own thing. That's why we're seeing so many of those openings too. So it's not necessarily a sign of expansion. It could also just be a sign that there's a lot of experienced people that are trying to do their own thing now, which in a couple of years down the line could then mean that you can expand to hire other people too. If they make it through, right? Because there is, in my opinion, there is a shift happening where a lot of people are realizing that, like, even if we were to like just do what we're doing, do like a triple A or let's say quadruple A stuff that we've been doing for all this time, it becomes the margins are becoming slimmer and slimmer, right? That's why live service is a thing. We kind of talked about that last time, I think. Because there needs to be some sustainability there, right? And I think a lot of people are just like sick and tired of just like, yeah, working in a system that is not good enough for them. And then also, in a lot of cases, what we see out there just like shovels a lot of that money, like just straight up to like the C-suite, right? So that frustration just leads to like a bunch of people, a bunch of talented people just doing their own thing. Do-do-do-do-do. Let's have a look. So apparently, going back to the Ubisoft thing, right? Let's actually have a look at. No work? Yeah. Let's have a look at an article here. I'm literally just reading up at the same time as we're doing here, right? This is an article from 15th of October, just trying to get like some sort of more information, because it looks like it was a lot of people, like almost 700 people were taking part, with Montpellier, Paris, Annecy, Lyon all being affected. And I think this was a later update, like I think Milan like jumped in as well. So yeah, this is like from working from home, and I would assume that indirectly also had a lot to do with the wages as well, right? Because if you have a good wage, like there's more of an incentive to then go back to like the studio, right? If they ask you. Of course, there's like a whole bunch of stuff like going in there. It's complex, but for a lot of people, like working from home actually like left them with a lot more money too, right? So if there's like a compensation thing happening there, it could also work out for them. The same thing happened when this is actually an interesting example of how like the game industry like affects each other. So Atos Montreal, and this is a couple of years ago, I can't remember the year that it was in, they decided to go to 4-day work week, right? Without a salary cut. And that is really important because as a reaction of that, there were like quite a few people that decided to leave other studios to then join them, because yeah, who wouldn't want to work like 4 days a week, right? So in order to have people stay at their companies, a lot of companies started offering a 20% increase on their wages all of a sudden, because they knew that people were leaving because of that, right? So it's actually quite interesting how like the 4-day work week has like a massive effect on like the studios around it as well, that it can potentially like lead to like a massive transfer of skills. Francisco saying, last week I was at CIG in Poland. Really nice experience. I got some precious feedback from an artist that works in Sferasoft. On way to join the studio and connect with people that share passions. Yeah, it's awesome. It is really nice. Do we have like any more recent news on this? Be curious. Doesn't look like it. 20 days ago, 70 days. So yeah, this is about like Milan start getting like solidarity as well. But I would be curious to know what like the outcome of it was. But I guess we're not gonna find out. Interesting. We'll be curious to look into it more. Yeah. We don't have to dwell on that like sad tone, right? That's what we're here to do today. But I just want everyone to know that there is like a lot of positive stuff happening out there as well. And it's really, really important that you kind of take the time to reflect that as well. There's so many people that like reach out to me personally, like thanking me for like all the help and that they finally got a job, right? And it's really, really nice to see that there's like a lot of new people joining the industry as well. And that it's not only like joining a new studio, but it's also like opening like a new chapter in their books, right? In the book of life, if you want to call it that. Because what happens a lot is that a lot of people have to move for their job as well, like I did. That's going to be the same expectation there as well. And there are obviously people that don't want to do that, but if you are interested in that, like it is such like a life experience. Like travel to a new country, get like a whole new culture that you have to understand and like embed yourself into. Like it's awesome. Yeah. It's all a big adventure. Let's get started. So, for the people that are new, with Wednesday, the stuff that we're doing today is called Whip Wednesday. I do this event like every week, and what this basically means is that I'll look at the Discord channel, and people can basically tag like the work that they're doing, and they can share what they've been working on, and then also ask me questions, and then ask for feedback as well. That's what we're going to be talking about today. If you are like in the chat and you're unsure about something or you want to ask a question, feel free to do so as we're going through it, and then I'll kind of pick spots where I can answer those questions too, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to all be related to the stuff that we're showing off, but feel free to ask any questions. Let's just go saying communities like these are what really helped me in better understanding the industry and the art stuff. Really happy to be a member. Oh, thank you so much, Francesco. That's awesome. I'm glad you're having fun. It's always good to hear when people are enjoying their time in our community. Where's my pen? So, let's see. First one on the list is Anton. I think today is going to be like a pretty chill stream. We just have a couple of updates from people, so we're going to be talking about those. And then we have some ones where we have to like do a little bit of a deeper dive, but it's going to be pretty chill overall, I think. So, first one is from Anton. Anton is basically just showing off the recent updates that he did. Because last time we talked about potentially upping the presentation to make it more relevant to what they were doing, right? So like this could be like a part of an antique shop. I thought that was like a pretty interesting thing that you could play around with. And we're seeing like the first iteration of that here, right? So yeah, most of like all the other stuff is Megascan assets, as far as I'm assuming, and then the main cabinet is from Anton themselves. So overall, looking really good. If you want to go deeper into the story, right? The story is, oh, this is like an antique shop. I would love to see some price tags on things, right? Like really selling the idea that this is a shop. So you could just have like little price tag saying like, oh, this is the price, this is like a bunch of information, and then do that on like a bunch of items. Right, and make it really feel like it's a shop. I think that would be freaking awesome. It's those ideas that are going to make it shine, right? Like really putting in the time and the work to push it to the next level. So yeah, find a couple of good places for those price tags. Potentially just add like more clutter on it. And try to find a way where you make it a little bit more focused on like the main asset of the scene, right? Which is going to be like this this cupboard or like this cabinet. A couple of things that you can do there is use a vignette. So vignette is going to darken the corners, but also what I would want to say is give the asset itself, give it more room in your presentation. So give it a little bit more room to breathe, right? Like just zoom out a little bit more, or like move the camera back, give it like a little bit more space. And then also look at references for antique stores, right? Antique stores are usually really, really cluttered. So making use of that is going to help you sell like the story idea too. Where I'm imagining like an antique store, there's going to be like a bunch of stuff on top of here too. Maybe there's like a box with like some stuff in it, and maybe some more vases, like all that kind of stuff. Like really just try to fill it up a little bit, while also like keeping it a little bit open so that people can kind of look at the asset itself, right? So I kind of like this approach where you kind of just have like a couple of vases, maybe some smaller stuff that you can just find. Like honestly, whatever you can find on like Megascans is going to work here, right? And then just stack some stuff on top of it too. It could be cool. Yeah, and then I feel like there's something extra that you could add with the walls as well. But so far, so good, right? Like, I love the way that you're approaching this. I love the first iteration of this antique shop. Now you just need to kind of make it work. And then also, maybe we'll split this off. So second part is like the presentation. So first, thinking about your framing. Go for a cinematic framing, right? So 21 by 9 is like the usual recommendation. Use that vignette that we talked about before. And then also try to be a little bit more focused with your composition as well. Because right now it's just, I feel like we're standing in a warehouse that has like the most boring light setup ever, right? But if I'm imagining like an antique store, I'm imagining going into like a dingy, kind of like moody lit kind of place where that sort of like vibe comes out, right? That's kind of what I want to see. And that's also going to help with the composition too. Dots is coming in. Hey, the main asset looks great, but it has a floaty feeling. Meaning that it's either missing contact shadows or something can be done better with the contrast, but maybe that's just me. No, I think I agree. So that's one thing that we kind of talked about last week as well. I think a lot of it comes down to the lighting. But what I focused on last week was specifically doing something on the legs where you have like a little bit of a bevel. Even though that bevel wouldn't be there in real life, you kind of need to emphasize those things to make sure that they're not floating. So there is a bevel there now, or well, I think there is, but it still feels like it's floating, right? So that's a good thing to call out. Let's add that into feedback as well. Thank you, Dots. That's awesome. So yeah, there's an asset like a bevel could help with that, right? Like Dots is saying, contact shadows could help with that as well. Kind of just like add that extra well, what is usually AO, right? But like just add that like little crisp element there. So contact shadows. And then yeah, like we said, potentially a bevel as well, like increasing that. But yeah, presentation is definitely the framing, the vignette, focusing, like having a better focus on the asset, and that is mainly going to come from the lighting plus the composition as well, right? You never ignore the composition, but those two working together are definitely going to help here. The price tag is going to look cool as well. Yeah, the composition and like how you're going to frame it kind of depends on the asset that you can find on Megascans or whatever free package is out there, right? So something to keep in mind. But yeah. Thank you for the update, Anton. Looking good, looking good. We're in the home stretch. So keep it up, man. Next one for today is Cody. Oh, I got the names all confused here today. Cody or Ninja Floss. Let's have a look. First of all, new to Beyond Extend. So yeah, welcome, Cody. Happy to have you here. But I thought I'd share an environment that I'm currently working on. I wanted to do a Lovecraftian horror scene, but in a modern context. Let's see. The big idea for this scene is having an insane guy living in a drainage pipe or a culvert building. Some kind of gateway to Carcosa. I have no clue what that means, but I think it must have something to do with like Lovecraftian horror, right? I'm not too deep into that world. I wanted to create a small desert scene around the entrance of the exterior, moving to a weird occult scene on the inside where the guy is building a gateway. Okay. Interesting. So the first thing that I'll say is that the connection between the bunker being in the middle of a desert and then the place itself being really built up and like really connected, right? While also being what was it? Like a drainage pipe or a culvert. There's a huge disconnect there happening. Because like why would you need like drainage in like the middle of the desert, right? So I'm gonna point that out. It's not that big of a deal. It's super easy to fix, but it's just I'm gonna call that out, right? So we've got drainage versus desert, and we're gonna add like a question mark to it. The easy thing to do here. Oh, honestly, let me move this stuff up as well. We're gonna add that over here. The easiest thing to do is just to remove this shot, right? I don't think we're gaining anything by adding that shot in there at all. So you can just like remove it and it's going to cost you nothing when it comes to the scene, right? The most interest, the most intrigue is about this person building a portal to like a different dimension or maintaining a portal to a different dimension or something like that. All the interesting stuff is happening here, right? That is the cool part. Him doing it in the middle of the desert or in the middle of the city, that's kind of just like some additional breadcrumbing stuff that is honestly probably not worth putting the time into it to make it look good, right? And you probably realize that by yourself as well, because you put it in the middle of the desert, which makes the whole thing really easy to create, right? So I think that's like a deliberate move on your end to not overscope on the scene, which is good. But I would drive it even further to say, hey, why do we need that? Why do we need that like individual screenshot at all? That viewpoint is not really adding to the story. So that's an easy fix. Real easy. Let's continue reading. This is what I've come up with the podcast stage so far. He'll be living in the top left area. So that's like this kind of area over here. That's his living quarters. So, and then we have the gateway is down there as well. So that's like the gate, right? Cool. Let's see. I'm really trying to focus on storytelling with this project. I want everything to be fairly grounded and believable. For the living area, I've included a lot of survival items and camping supplies. And later on, I plan to include notes and other thematic elements to help us tell the story. The rectangular elements hanging above the living space are stand-ins for air ducts. Oh, those things here. Okay. Down below, I thought it would be interesting if the gateways he's constructing was made out of concrete and broken mirrors, with more broken mirrors attached to the railings behind. Hopefully the idea comes through in the screenshots. So there's a lot going on here already. And it's going to be highly dependent on the way that you execute on the visuals of the gate, if that idea is going to be clearly communicated or not. Because what I'm imagining is that you just have like some broken mirrors and stuff. I don't think that is going to be enough to communicate that it is potentially like a different dimension, right? There's so many questions that I already have when it comes to, oh, he's constructing a gateway, which is a cool idea, right? I like that idea a lot. But then why are the mirrors broken, and why is there also concrete added to the mix? Like there's a lot of complexity happening where maybe that complexity is not necessarily needed at this point. I would honestly just condense it to like the main idea of, hey, this person is making a portal, and the way that he's doing that is by using a mirror or something like that, right? And if the mirror is like slightly cracked or potentially like a little bit broken, like that could work, but I would rather have like a giant mirror that maybe is like stitched together from like a bunch of different mirrors, right? And then it is a little bit broken up, but we still see like the main. We're gonna go to this. So yeah, imagine that this is like a complete mirror. There's some cracks, there's some floating pieces, but like there's still like a main surface that is like really consistent. And then what I'm imagining is that this becomes like the portal through which we view that like other world, right? So yeah, I'm currently imagining that this will be our view into the other dimension. Right, but we kind of need to have like a consistent surface here to make that really clear that that is what we're doing with the scene. Because if we're gonna, the more we break up this mirror, the less we're gonna see from that different dimension, and the more it's gonna get lost, right? So that's the way that I'm seeing this. And you can potentially do some really cool tricks. I'm not sure how you would like technically do it, but I'm imagining that like a render target could be like your first thing to investigate, right? Where you're basically setting up, I don't know if render target is like the actual term for this, but where you set up like a secondary camera somewhere on the outside of this, and you build like a really quick second environment, or you even just have like an image or something like that. You can do both. That is going to serve as like the other dimension, right? And then you can kind of do some like shenanigans with the material that is like kind of warping and like kind of distorting and just like it looks like this is like a portal to a different dimension. Compared to having it all broken, that's going to be really hard to like indicate, right? So yeah, have a consistent shape as a portal. Opposed is saying, hi Tim, I have a Beyond Extended subscription. Do I just have to post the render shots in the Discord, or do I have to register to another process other than subscription for the feedbacks and reviews? No. Like you just, if you're in the Discord, read through the current announcement, and the latest announcement is literally going to take you step by step what you need to do. It's very simple. You just go to the work in progress channel that we have, post your work up there, and tag that work with work in progress Wednesday. And as soon as that is getting set up, then it automatically gets added to like the people that I need to review for each session. Hello, Magma. Welcome. Good to see you back. How are you doing? I am doing good. Good. Had a pretty unsatisfying day at work, but hey, we're gonna survive that. It's not gonna be the first, it's not gonna be the last. Thanks. I've never been a part of a community. However, I'd like to begin with this community. Yeah. So yeah, make like on your dashboard on the website, you just have to like connect your Discord account if you have one already. If not, make one, link it up there, and then you should be invited to join the Discord. Magma is working on a little scene, so the perfect timing as background entertainment. That is awesome. What are you working on, Magma? In the meantime, let's have a look here. So we talked about the portal a little bit. Let's continue reading on. So that's the gateway, right? The gateway is constructed out of concrete and broken mirrors. I think just simplifying that to the concrete mirrors, that could be cool. You can still do your idea where this could actually be really interesting. I don't know if that was like intended, But let's actually have. Okay, let me explain what I'm thinking here. So imagine that you use this camera angle. And so this is going to be the camera angle where the mirror, or like we'll call it the gate. Where the gate is whole, right? So we're going to play with perspective a little bit. So in this screenshot, what we will see is that like all the different shards of the gate, they form like one consistent shape. But they only do so if you're standing like right in front of it using this camera angle, right? And then from the other camera angles, what you could then have is have them all like scattered in different locations. So we're playing with the perspective a little bit, and you can kind of build that into your sequence that you have on ArtStation, where that is potentially like the last scene that you see. You kind of have like the reveal of like, oh, now the portal is aligned, right? So it's gonna look like really weird and chaotic in the beginning, but then once you're standing in front of it, like it becomes like a complete gate, which could be pretty interesting to work with. It's gonna be somewhat technically involved, right? You're gonna have to do some work to have it all lined up and all that kind of stuff. I mean, not necessarily. Might be. Depends on how you do it. So there could be some work there, but that could be really cool, right? Playing with your idea that you want to have the pieces scattered, like you could have it so that it does line up in like a single frame, which does give you like the best of both worlds, because now we can actually see through the portal while still having it as part of like a broken mirror. So let's see. I'm open to any feedback. Specifically though, I love to hear people's thoughts on the room layout and the general composition of the scene. If anyone has thoughts on the project, on the object he's constructing, or props that increase the believability, I'm interested to hear those as well. Very good, very good. What I will say about the composition is that you can increase the interest by working with shapes that are a bit more interesting, especially with the portal as a centerpiece, right? So what I'm thinking about is that if we do a comparison between the scenes. Oh, hello, Cody. It's good to see you here. I didn't make the connection that you were the Cody that we were talking about today. Lovely to see you, and welcome again to the community. So if we do a comparison here, right? So this is top down. What we have right now, just really quickly, is sort of like this shape, right? And here's the portal. This is where you come in, and this is where like his living quarters are gonna be, right? Put us something like that, just like there's here as well. It's a point. What we could do is we could still have the living quarters here, have the walkway still here, but then it becomes like a rounded shape that will then also better support, and potentially just like add a walkway here and just continue it all the way through or something like that, or some asymmetry. Always looks good. And then you could add the portal here, making it like more believable, or like not more believable, but like more interesting when it comes to the composition of the whole scene, right? Because now what we're going to introduce is that we have like all these curving objects that we can then like attach like the broken mirror pieces onto, which is going to look really cool, because it's going to kind of focus the composition on like the center piece, right? It's sort of like it's embracing the portal, which could be interesting to play around with. So that's what I would do. I think the rest of it makes a lot of sense, right? You kind of you can keep like the gantry up until a certain point, because that is obviously, there's a bunch of nice like leading lines. But then from this point, I would honestly just like kind of curve it up. Oh god, forgot that I did this. You can kind of just curve it up like that. It's going to make it like a little bit more interesting to look at. And then you can do some cool stuff where if this is in the middle, you can attach like light arrays or I don't know, whatever you want to do, right? Like you could almost have like spotlights that are kind of just focused on like the center, right? And they're all shining onto the portal somehow. Or if you want to go for like a more shabby setup, you can have like kind of string lights set up where there's like these workers string lights that they just hang from like the ceiling somehow. I think that's going to be cool, having that circle shape just like surround the whole thing and making the central piece like the portal. Going to be good. Cody's saying, I really like those ideas for the gate, especially the perspective idea. Definitely worth exploring. The bigger gate is definitely a better focus as well. I think so too. Yeah, you want to kind of make it impressive, right? Like that is a focal point, and one of the things that we as artists get to play with is just like the sense of scale and proportions, right? So by making it bigger, it's already going to be more impactful to the scene. The amount that you do that towards, like that is up to you, right? So yeah. What you could then potentially do, I'm just spitting out ideas here, right? Is you have this hole here, which is gonna have like this nice like beam of light. We're not really using it at the moment. We might as well just add that here and have it shine onto the portal itself, right? So we have like natural light coming in instead of having to set up like, I don't know, fake lights and all that kind of stuff. That is also an idea. That could work as well. But yeah, definitely going for like a circular approach would work nice. Yeah. The rest of it looks interesting. This stuff is gonna look interesting as well. Let's see, what else can we do here? You kind of have like just like a bunch of research going on. A little bit of storage, like cooking. So it's almost like this side is home, right? And then this side is kind of just like research, which is cool. Kind of just dividing it up into spaces, I guess. I guess you could extend home outwards as well. It's cool. Then we have the research. You could do some really cool stuff by just hanging like the entire walls filled with like just like freaking crazy thoughts, right? And it's just like, I don't know, like I kind of want to see their mental state, right? If we're talking about like a very Lovecraftian horror, like I'm imagining that this person is going crazy by like thinking about what might happen, and that maybe like the knowledge that he's getting is not like really human. It's like, I don't know, somewhat gathered from like just the manifestations of him going crazy or whatever. So that is for you to explore, right? Like the Portal 2 Ratman. I wish I got that reference, but I've never played Portal. I'm sorry to disappoint everyone. Cody is saying, do you have any thoughts on how it could balance the scale of the portal with the practicality aspect? Something that could be reasonably be constructed by one guy, really digging these ideas. I mean, you can have a portal that is like built out of like different pieces of a mirror, right? You just have to make the mirror pieces large enough. And if you then go into the logic on how he's building it and kind of keeping it consistent, there's so many ways that you can approach that. But it basically comes down to one thing, right? Like the individual pieces need to kind of be small enough so that you could imagine that this is one person just making all of this, right? So you can still balance it up with, let's say this is like a big chunk, and then this is like made out of like a couple of smaller chunks. But I would definitely have like a couple of big ones in the middle, right? Because we want to keep as much of that vision of like this alternate dimension intact as possible, right? And then on the outside, you can then have like smaller splinters, right? That's the way that I would look at this whole thing. And then you can kind of play around with like how irregular you kind of want it. But yeah, that is something that if you are worried about that, block it in first, see how it looks, and then just iterate from that point. But yeah, just keep in mind that like the pieces just need to be small enough that one person can like ideally do this. The mirror will have real-time reflections. Is it okay to do an engine? I don't even think we're gonna play around with reflections on the mirror here. The mirror is literally just like our looking glass into an alternate dimension, right? I'm thinking about games like Dishonored, where they had like, I think it's literally called looking glass technology, or Prey, where they kind of have like the same thing where you can kind of just look into like a fake constructed world, right? And then you smash the glass and it's gone. So it doesn't, you're not really going to have reflections. It's going to be a portal into a different dimension. If you wanted to do real-time reflections, you can do it in an engine with like a planar map or with like ray trace reflections, all that kind of stuff. They're just really freaking expensive. If you do it for your personal work, if you need that, then it's fine. But if you do that for game purposes, you're gonna have a lot of talks with your technical artists and programmers to kind of figure that one out, because that's tough. I'm thinking the mirror would be exactly like you're describing. I'm hoping to go for a wide expanse of stars on the other side. Like the render target idea sounds interesting. Yeah, this is one of the things, right? I don't know where that rabbit hole is going to land me, but I know that something like that is pointing me in the right direction. So it might not be a render target, but it's going to be something that is going to be attached to that. Good opportunity to try out making parallax windows. Oh, you're talking about like cube map reflections and all that kind of stuff? That could potentially work. I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure how that's gonna look with like so many fragments of the portal. That's the main thing that I'm kind of thinking about. When you're making like just like a star system, right? No one's gonna really care because it's just gonna be dots and like space and all that kind of stuff. So it's very forgiving. If you wanted to have like an actual thing there, like an actual civilization, let's say, it's gonna be a little bit different. So I'm not sure if that is gonna be enough. But that might be one of the things to investigate. Because yeah, like cube maps and fake interiors and all that kind of stuff, they can definitely help out with this too. Cool. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your work, Cody. And again, welcome to the community. Happy to have you. It's a really cool idea, right? Talked a lot about feedback. I really like the idea. I like how kind of like nuts and intriguing it is at the same time, where there's going to be lots of like investigations into like how to make things work and just like tinkering about. So it's going to be really cool to see how far you get with this. So yeah, best of luck and keep us up to date. Of all the ideas, thank you. I'll be back next week with more iterations for sure. Awesome. Next one up. Let's jump on over to Francesco. Francesco is working on a brick material in Substance Designer. Work in progress. The idea is to set up vertex painting to create material variations on large walls. But for windows with the arched brick pattern, so the one that we can see like in the middle, would it be better to assign 2 materials to the same mesh during UV mapping? Two materials to the same mesh during UV mapping and using 2 texture sets? Or should I create a trim sheet for all the modular walls? For a trim sheet, you would want to see like how much more you need in your scene, and if it's then worth making a trim sheet just for that. If it's only for that like curvy piece, probably not worth it. If there are more elements, maybe worth it. It kind of just depends on like how many of these like unique elements you do want to add on your walls. What I would do for now, and maybe that's going to lead me to like some other feedback that I have, but what I would do for now is see how far you can get by just mapping like a tileable to it and just cutting it out. Right, because yours, depending on the texture that you're going to use, they might look slightly different. Right, because yours are going to have like these protrusions. But I would be surprised if these are like really noticeable, right? So give that a try first. Oh, if it's just for that, yeah, no need to make like a trim sheet. You just have to make it work with the tileable in that case. And just be smart or very specific with your UV mapping, right? Because what you could do is you could basically like reconstruct whatever shape you wanted by just cutting around it in like a very specific manner, right? So this here is like the pattern that you need. And then you just map it wherever you want, right? And then this is just like a single UV. This is going to have like a couple of cuts. This one is going to have a couple of cuts. And you just kind of just cut it out in your geometry and just map it onto the same tileable, right? Because honestly, if this is the amount of polygons that you're afraid of to use, like this is not a lot, right? So just some mapping, yeah. Exactly, especially because there's nothing else that we can put on the trim sheet. It's probably not worth making like a trim sheet just for this one element. There is another thing that I kind of quickly wanted to say. Is let me see. So that's like that main question answered, right? But what I was gonna say is that in the texture here, you're gonna notice this as well as soon as you start like mapping it out on like big surfaces. There is gonna be a lot of repetition. Maybe you did that to conform to this pattern, but now that we kind of talked about it, you don't need to necessarily do that, right? So make sure that there is like a randomized offset between like, especially these patterns, right? Where it's like very straight. Because what this is going to do, if you map this onto a wall, you're going to see a line going straight up. So you kind of want to break that up where there's like more chaos into, or more randomization, not necessarily chaos, right? Kind of, yeah. I was going to say, kind of looking at like the brick wall here, you can even, in this one, you can kind of see like some horizontal repetition. Like a good tileable kind of takes care of large surfaces without having to do like additional work on top of it, right? So yeah, just a little bit more randomization. And test. Whenever you have a mesh or like a texture, right? Don't just test it in Substance Designer or Painter. Actually use it in your scene and see how it's working on like the surfaces that you're going to use it on, right? That context is going to be really, really important. Magma is saying, I'm working on a farm shot. I should become a member and join the Discord server so I can share it and get feedback. Unintentional promo. You're working on a farm shot. That's cool. That is cool. Is that is it gonna be like a large open environment? Is it gonna be like a game, or what's the plan with the farm? I'm also wondering, what about moss? Should I make it in Designer and some fancy shaders in Unreal with some AO marking? AO masking, I'm assuming. Yeah, like for moss, like you just make it in, you just make it in Designer, then you add it into Unreal Engine, and you use like height blended vertex paint, right? So that allows you to blend two textures together based on their height map. And if you then like use the height map of your bricks, it's gonna nicely conform with like all the cracks and crevices and all that kind of stuff, and gives you like a lot of control too. So that's the way that it's usually done, where you just have like individual textures that you can then plug into your master material and then just paint them in wherever you want it, or drive it with some alternative method, right? Like vertex painting is one of them, but there's other ways of like blending those two. But vertex painting is just like, well, vertex painting with height blending specifically gives you a lot of control for like a very simple setup, right? And it's also very versatile too. Hello, CoCloud. How are you doing? Good to see you here. And hello, Designer. Hope you're doing well. Yeah. Thank you for the question, Francisco. If you got any more, feel free to drop them in the chat and we can discuss it. But looking forward to seeing this come together. Kind of jumped a little bit all over the place. Sorav is next. So Sorav is working on an old kerosene fan, which is pretty fucking sweet. What the hell is the purpose of this though? Is it like a heating fan? That looks crazy. 1816? I'm assuming because we have like a lamp next to it that it must be some sort of like heat lamp or like a heat fan, I guess. But that's going to be, I mean, it's basically cooling itself like constantly by just spinning around. So that's so weird. So interesting. Okay. Let's have a look. So I wanted to add more hard surface props to my portfolio. I'm looking for a way to create this shape and wanted to know if there's any other ways of doing it other than modeling. Oh, are you calling out a specific shape? Because I'm not too sure what you mean. Or just like the whole thing, just by itself. If you're talking about these cutouts, and you're gonna, you think, because you do want to get up close and personal with a prop like this, right? So there's two options usually when it comes to doing these kind of props. Number one would be opacity, right? So that would mean like we're masking it out in the texture. The limitation of that opacity okay, there might be another option. I was gonna say the limitation of that opacity is that usually once you get up close, it doesn't look good because you still have a plane, right? So it doesn't really have like any depth to it or anything like that. You can kind of get away with like using the normal map on like a small lid like this, and it might be fine. That is something to test out. The other thing would be to actually model it in, which is probably like a more expensive option, like geometry wise, but it looks like you're already in the deep end with like the top end anyway, which that can definitely be optimized, right? But like you're not really going for like a low poly, well, I shouldn't say that. You're not really going for like a hyper optimized like asset anyway, by the looks of it. But yeah. So generally there's like two options here. The reason why I was hesitant a little bit is that what you could do, this is like the third option, is opacity plus POM. So POM is parallax occlusion mapping. It's a little bit more advanced. It's a little bit more in depth, right? So you kind of need to know what you're doing at this point. But that could help you get some of the depth that you were missing by just cutting out the geo or just having an opacity map. That could be a way of getting it out. I've just given you all the options. I would honestly say that like this is probably going to be the way to go. Like number one, because you are only cutting out like a little bit and it is pretty flat by design as well. It's not like we have like a big lip or anything like that we have to be worried about. So just cutting it out is probably going to be the best option here. And then with a normal map, you can kind of just fake that little edge around the corner to make it look like it has like a little bit of an edge. That is just coming from like the normal map. And you can highlight that with a roughness map too, if you wanted. Let's see. Just curious if there's any necessity to add a diorama with the prop while showcasing it in the portfolio. Like the straight up answer is no, it's not required or it's not necessary. But if you're not doing it, then you're not putting your best foot forward when everyone else is doing it, right? Presentations, especially for props in the recent years, have really gone to like the next level. And presentation is a big part of like being seen and getting potential jobs and all that kind of stuff, right? So if you are not doing it and you skip a couple of steps on the presentation, then in comparison to what other people are doing, why wouldn't you put in like a little bit more work, right? And I'm gonna be honest, like I'm not expecting you to make like a whole bunch of assets and make like a full diorama, right? What I'm talking about with like a singular asset is that you make like a little bit of a diorama using Megascan assets. That's it. Or you kind of go the opposite way and you really push like, I don't know, like the studio quality aspect of it. So one of the more famous ones is obviously going to be the hand drill, right? I mean, if we're going to switch over to the main screen, everyone knows like probably which one I'm talking about. This was done for like ArtStation Learning. If you can get to this level of detail and quality, I don't need to see a scene. But the reason why this jumps out is because it is filled with storytelling, right? There's a lot of storytelling that comes into a scene like this. And you can see that in all the little details. That is what it's always about, right? So a good way to do that yourself is then go towards something like this, where you can add like a little bit of extra stuff to it, and it gives us like a better indication of like, oh, this is actually in a world somewhere, right? Like this is actually like placed in a scene, and it just, in my opinion, it makes it look like so much better than just having it on like a black background, right? Especially. Let's have a look at some other examples. There's a couple of wrenches as well. Buddy of mine, Matthew Wilshaw, he did a really good one. I keep kind of calling him out on it, that he did a good job. So you can go for a clean presentation like this, right? So it's the same example, but it's all about like the amount of detail that you put into the presentation, right? So is it necessary? No. But then the expectations are gonna be that there's a lot of really cool stuff, like really cool details and storytelling embedded into the prop that are gonna make up for the fact that it's just like floating around, right? But in my opinion, like this looks 1,000 times better than this. Right? Like this gives me like a whole bunch of background. Like compared to something like this. If we were just like doing an apples to apples comparison, right? So yeah, what it comes down to is basically whatever you want to do with it, right? Um, what also happens is that if we talk about this stuff, it's like I'm using references for people that have done things in the past in such a way, but like maybe you like presenting your work in a different way, right? I'm personally a big fan of using like somewhat bold colors, going for potentially like a more graphical presentation, especially more recently, right? So if you look at some of the work, let's see if I can quickly find it, because we did a studio project. Well, we basically called it like Beyond Extend Studios. So we got like a bunch of people together and we made like our own asset pack, which is really cool. But the way that I presented the assets at the end was I did it with like very graphical, like very catching presentation. Let me give you an example here. So this is the way that I approached it. All right, let me switch back to the main screen. So this is the way that I presented like all the assets, right? It's sort of like a studio setup, but just with like a very intense like background color, right? Like it's still pretty clean, pretty minimalistic, but it kind of has like a more graphical quality to it, right? So yeah, there's so many ways of presenting stuff. Yeah. Short overview there. Basically what it comes down to is you can do whatever you want. It just needs to look good. If we're doing like a TLDR. Hello, see ya. Good to see you here. How are you doing? Cool. Yeah, I hope that was helpful, Sorav. And thank you for sharing your work. That looks cool. Yeah, the team did a fucking awesome job on that. How do you know how much materials you can specify for a model to keep a low draw call number? I think every material that you call in is a draw call number, right? So the more stuff that you add on top of like an asset, the more draw calls that you're gonna introduce, right? There is no set limit because that limit depends on the hardware and the game and like how much you're adding to the game. All that kind of stuff is very dependent on the studio that you're working for and the project and all that kind of stuff. So there's no set limit, because even the difference is that for a weapon you could have let's say 6 texture sets, right, which isn't uncommon, but you wouldn't add like that amount of textures to like a wrench or something like that, especially in a game. So I think the answer that you're looking for is that you kind of keep it as low as possible without sacrificing the visuals of it. And that is probably as close as I can get to giving you like a concrete number. Because let's be honest, like the stuff that I was just showing off, like the wrench, like that would not be in a game. Like the hand drill, the wrench, like it would never be as detailed in a game, right? It's a showcase of how detail oriented you can work, and how close you can get to like realistic looking stuff, right? But that is not what you're gonna see in a lot of games. There's a lot of fakery and a lot of trickery going in games, especially on stuff that doesn't matter, right? If it's like an important asset to the storytelling or whatever your game is, if it's important to like what you want to showcase, you're gonna spend more resources on it compared to other things that are less important. Cool. Also, whenever we're talking about anything technical, I am not a technical environment artist, right? So always take that with a heavy grain of salt because I'm just an artist. Okay, Alexander, let's have a look. Where was I? Here we go. I know it's a massive scene, something you could work on for a whole year, but I'm not worried. Okay, let's have a look. With that said, as you can see, I put a lot of work in the scene. Now I'm ready to move forward with the production planning. But what I'd really like from you is the feeling about the scene. Can you feel it? Does it have a sense of growth? Like moving from darkness towards light? The feeling of, I need to go there? Oh, you're talking about the composition, right? Or are you talking about the progression of the scene itself? If that is the thing that you want to emphasize, like going... Oh, sorry, are you talking about like progression or the composition, Alexander? Like, which one of the two? Because, yeah, they're both quite different, right? Composition. Okay. So in terms of composition, I think that composition was pretty good from the beginning, right? It just depends on how far you want to take it as an artist, right? If you want to take it from like, hey, we're moving towards the light and this is like a very holy place, all that kind of stuff, there's like a lot that you could potentially do more with the composition even at this point, right? A lot of this very fundamental subconscious stuff is usually heavily embedded in games and movies already, where, for example, what could be a good example actually? You have a lot of single player games that if you go through a struggle or like you're going through like a heavy emotional moment, they will take you down into somewhere, right? And then once you kind of like overcome that challenge, you kind of go up again, just to indicate like with a very visual way that you are like overcoming something and you're coming out of hell or like out of whatever it is, right? Like there's very visual correlations between the two. Really simplifying a lot of stuff here, right? So think about it in that way, where potentially if you wanted to add more of that to your scene, you could have the foreground being either at like a lower elevation than it is currently, and you're making your way up to like the staircase to heaven or something like that, right? Like very literal stuff. And you can do that in like a very subtle way by increasing, like putting the camera potentially lower down, or even having like a bunch of staircases or like steps over here, right? That you could have like a staircase kind of leading you up towards like the final thing. And I don't think it necessarily matters too much that staircases don't like 100% like match like the altitude that you're gaining, right? But like staircases are like a good way of just like elevating you up to like the next level. And so it's very symbolic, very subconscious kind of stuff that we're kind of thinking about. Another thing is potentially being more specific with where you put your light, right? Or like how the light affects the scene, and where that light comes from even. Because right now there's a large part of it that gets lit up by light, but potentially what could be more interesting is that, let's have a look actually. What could we do? This is very experimental, right? So I would just like play around with this stuff. See. Have a quick glance here. So that we only get like a sliver of light. If you see what I'm saying. So all the areas that I kind of crossed out, they're like going to be in darkness, right? But I kind of like what this shape is doing. So it could potentially be interesting that we have like a lining up of the shape with like potentially like I don't know, an invisible mountain ridge that's here, right? And that's why this place is there, because it lines up on like a certain day of the year that this like gap in between the mountains lines up with like this element of this building. And that's why everyone's making their pilgrimage here, because it is only like this one time of the year that they kind of have the chance to bask in the light, right? That aligns with like the whole structure. And then potentially even, yeah, if it kind of aligns with like the bridge itself, it's gonna help with like moving people towards that direction too. So that could potentially be like an interesting way of approaching your light in the scene. Just to make it like a little bit more focused. Like literally like a sliver of light. And then what you could play around with is then pushing the separation between all the layers that you already have, right? So what I mean with that is that the foreground is going to be super dark, right? So number one is going to be super dark. Number two, like this area over here, and then potentially some of this stuff here, going to be number two, which is like halfway in between. And then you have like the strong lighting come in, and like that is going to be like number three then, right? So that's going to be like the brightest point. Like really being very deliberate with the way that you break up your scene. I don't know if I showed this before. The work from Otto Ostera is like a big inspiration when it comes to this specific stuff for me. Let's bring him up on the screen. So I love the way that like these scenes are constructed in like a very methodical way, like compositionally and like art direction wise, where the foreground is the darkest, you have the middle ground, which is like sort of is in between, and then you have like a distance, which is like lighter, right? So you have like this very deliberate hierarchy in the scene, especially with then it's almost I almost look at this in like a very concept art way, where there's like specific separations by adding like fog to bring out the silhouette of this wall, for example, right? And it's also very interesting the way that this wall is built. It is not straight, right? It kind of is very organic and kind of comes at you a little bit. And you kind of have this like triangle like composition, like taking you into the scene. Same can be done here as well, where you have very dark foreground, then you have the middle ground, and then you have like the background, right? And that layering is what I really like about these scenes. That is something that you can kind of see like recurring in his work specifically a lot, right? And then where you place the how would you say it, like where you place like your attention and like the pathing that people will take is kind of like a really interesting indication of like, oh, this light here is specifically to shine a light on what is happening over here, and it kind of takes you into the place because we have this dock kind of blocking you in, and it's kind of guiding you by the hand and taking you more to the right, so like this place over here, which is where we're seeing this stuff, right? So I love that this is all like very deliberately like put in place. Yeah, definitely something to think about. I'll share his work in the chat as well if you want to check out. Yeah, have a look at that. Take inspiration from it too. And yeah, play around with different lighting scenarios, make it like really contrasty, like push and pull a little bit. You're still in the early phase, right? So a lot of experimentation can still be done. Let's see. I think that was it. Yeah. But overall, really cool adjustments. I love the changes that you've done to the bridge, right? It feels less noisy, less contrasty, and it feels more logical as well. I like the new additions of like the foliage too. I think that's going to look pretty sick, especially again in contrast with the wall itself. But yeah, have a play around with it. Thank you, Alexander. Appreciate it so much. And I think that is already it for tonight. So, pretty short session. Yeah, I'm gonna make use of that too. So, oh, thank you so much, Alexander. I'm happy that it helped. A couple of people have asked this in the chat as well. And we've actually had someone join just now. I think Designer just joined. So welcome to the community. Happy to have you here. But if you want to join yourself, you can find the link in the description as well if you want to do that. Yeah. Sia is just in awe of the scene. I don't know if you're talking about Otto's work or Alexander's work, or just that we're so close on time. But yeah, I will also post like the final images to the chat, which I completely forgot to do last time because it was a pretty chaotic week last week. So apologies for that. Yeah, I'll make sure to save these all out and add them to all of the individual threads as well. Yeah. I'm probably gonna head on out now, play a little bit more games, and then prepare for a longer day at work tomorrow. So awesome to have you all here. I wish you all a nice evening. And yeah, I'll see you in a week for a next edition of Wednesday. Bye-bye, everyone.